and divorce. You know, we can think of it as a very straight jacket. You're in a relationship, marriage relationship, you want it to come to an end, you go to court, you sign a paper, people say irreconcilable differences, we go. But there are many instances where, as CT tried to light a fire under this thing, whereby things come into play and you say no. Where Jesse's brought up, where there will be certain things that happen where you say are deemed as cruelty, and others whereby ownership, rights, privileges of your would-be partner come into play that could eventually lead to divorce or separation. Citi, what was it that you were trying to say?
What I was trying to say is this. There's a certain understanding among us Kenyans when it comes to issues of relationship. The very, very subject of equity becomes academic, it's not real. So that the relationship is about who is the senior partner and who has more rights in this particular relationship. I remember having a conversation with some young women whom I worked with once upon a time. Mm-hmm. And I was discussing this concept, something had jarred me. I was in one of the places I worked in, Migori specifically, mm-hmm. and an altercation had arisen in a cultural establishment. And there were some men who were manhandling some women. Mm. And I ventured to inquire what it is that was raising the ruckus. One of them was actually violent, and I actually asked and said, why this violence? And the fellow told me, I've been buying this lady a drink the whole night. And so now she's refusing to go. And I said,
go where?
I said, just let's pause. You bought her drinks. Did she ask for the drinks? I said, now after she accepted. He said, no, now she must come with me.
Ah, okay.
So I asked the lady, was that the understanding? He said, no, she was simply having a good time. So the guy asked, why did you accept the drinks in the first place? Essentially, I was witnessing something that it had been assumed it was a quid pro quo. I buy you drinks, you drink my drink, you go with me.
Yes.
Now, if that is the understanding, now this is a casual, this person, they hadn't come with this person. They met the person.
They just met along
at the cultural establishment now. Imagine a situation where they're living with this person.
You've paid good.
Yes. No, before even you've paid goat or chicken, you're just living, okay? Then you've paid, okay? And then with that mindset, what rights will that woman have in that relationship?
Now, I think that, especially with people, they think about rights and don't think about duties and responsibilities that come with those rights. So, for example, in your story and connecting it with a marriage, if I'm in a marriage, I think about the rights that accrue to me as a husband, as the man. I do not think about my duty not to harm this person. I do not think about my duty to protect and provide for her and everything else. And I do not think about my responsibilities under the law. So that when my rights are infringed, I don't stop and ask myself, am I doing my duty? Am I performing my responsibilities? So I think that is the whole concept around it, such that when you get someone not wanting to go home with someone they've just met that same night, when you talk about someone who is who wants to demand conjugal rights by way of rape, it just stems from the same thing, that they want to exercise what they believe to be, because sometimes it is just believed, what they believe to be their rights, but not thinking about what their responsibilities are in the circumstances.
There's also the story of the power dynamics.
Yes.
Which essentially is at the heart of what we're saying, and how it is men in our societies here understand power dynamics. What I have observed over time is the understanding is that they have the power dynamics. In some instances, they are the power dynamics, and everything else is subjugated to that particular power. Mm-hmm. So the discussions that you have will be academic, yes, but the practice and what they believe in their minds is completely different. Mm-hmm. Yes. So when it comes to some of these matters of even changing the name, see, now the issue of the name now makes this discussion even more interesting, because when you take that person's name, that deed is sealed.
What is sealed?
You, my friend, becomes property.
Is that what the law envisages when it says that you can take somebody's name? That if you take their name, you actually are their own? Can you own another human being in this day and age?
I really hate to agree on this one, but
please don't do it.
But to some extent, I do. Because in a marriage, you've taken your husband's name, and within the marriage, you've decided, I don't want this name anymore. Then you need his consent to go back to what was originally your name. So that just means he retains the power, because he can refuse to give you that consent. And just to tie it up, if you guys have a child and you wish to change the name of that child, there needs to be his consent. If you want to travel with that child out of the country, he needs the consent, whether he's providing for that child or not. So when we talk about people having power, it is because the letter of the law gives them that power.
Two questions here. We've talked about marriage, but I don't want to ask you define marriage straightforward. So I'll give a scenario where marriage is a little bit murky. You don't understand if it's truly marriage or not. And I'll use this approach, a long period of cohabitation. I once heard that if you cohabit with someone for, is it over 7 years, you are presumed to have married that person. So is this presumed shall or may in this case? Do you need to divorce someone you've cohabited with in case of a fallout because of that presumption?
So the whole issue of presumption of marriage has been a very big debate in legal spheres. To this day, there still exists debates because a judgment will come tomorrow and people will still debate on it. But what the law says is that every marriage, whether a customary one, whether a civil one, whether a Christian one, depending on whichever marriage it is, it has to be registered. And for a customary marriage, which are those ones where you take cows to the bride's home, after 2017, they have to be registered. The ones that occurred before 2017 are fine because the law does not work retrospectively. That legal notice came in 2017. So after 2017, there is no issue of you're cohabiting with someone or you're just you did a rorashio and did not register it. It has to be registered.
It has to be registered.
So once you register it, then you get the document, you get the marriage certificate that shows you're married. So now to get out of a marriage certificate now requires a divorce. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to seek clarification on that. So if you have been cohabiting, the law says you're not married.
You're not married.
You're not married.
You're not married.
It has to be registered at some point. So customary law, when you go
Rorashio.
that one,
That one.
where you go and
Stop. Rorashio is which one? And Gurario is which one?
Oh.
there's one that comes before the other.
yes.
And Rorashio is the last process, isn't it?
Yes.
The first
Rorashio
one
is
is
the
like-
first,
I don't know.
I think we need a marriage expert on this, not a lawyer, because those terms are very technical themselves.
Because
Yes, they are
essentially there's the
technical.
introduction and then there's
Yes.
the engagement,
Yes.
right?
Sorry,
Between the two, I don't know which one is called the other, but I think you kind of find that it replicates, especially across African culture. So there's a lot of folks right now who are in this situation that Jesse has described.
Yes.
That have not gotten anything registered. If you've not registered, because the law does recognize customary marriage where you've gone and there's been negotiation, elders both sides have agreed. Also religious agreements, the law recognizes, as well as now the courts at the AG. Those are recognized. So when you rock up and you're living in the same space for some time and then you say we are married, you're not.
Yes, and just a small clarification. Even those customary marriages where you take goats and there's a celebration and everything, but
Yeah.
you don't register it, it's not recognized.
Okay.
Yes. That was just a ceremony.
So then in such a situation, you cannot lay claim to this person, you cannot lay claim to property if there has been no registration of this relationship.
Yes, the long short is just you may use your children to do it. They will benefit as the children of the man, but not you as the wife, because you're not a wife.
Okay, next question. Property division after divorce. Are we still in the era of once you get out, you lose everything? There's some people who stick in toxic marriages because they're afraid that they'll go without any property. So talk to us about that. And equally, things to update after divorce. It can't just be your name. What else? Is it tax documents? what do you need to change? Transfer title deeds. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so it's a very broad discussion, but just to narrow it down, when it comes to matrimonial division of property, the court mostly looks at contribution, and that is one of the main things that they look at. And what contribution means is that if I get into a marriage and we acquire a house, and I bought the house as the man, I bought the land, but you as the wife, you contributed in some way, in that you kept that homestead running, you watered the plants, you did everything else. I don't mean to water down the accomplishments or the input of women in marriages and property, but what you contributed, the court looks at that and determines the share that you're supposed to get. Also, marriages are quite complicated because a man would be married to more than one wife, especially especially before customary marriages were registered. So you'd find, especially when you go to the rural areas, you'll find a man with multiple wives who would all now seek to benefit. So when you divorce this man, there has to be that allowance for he has other wives who have equally contributed and everything with that. So finally, to your last question, when you get out of a marriage, it is not just a name that you change. For instance, there is issues of property you acquire together. When you acquire land, is it jointly owned? Is it owned in common? So that will now inform what rights you have to that property and what share you have to that property. On issues of tax planning, you will need to amend that, because most of the people plan their taxes or do their taxes capturing their spousal income just for purposes of tax planning. Yes. So everything around that, you have to plan everything that you did with the husband. You sort of have to undo, for lack of a better word. Yes.
Okay. Custody issues come into play when you're looking at separation and divorces with children, young children. The practice, practice of judgment that we've seen historically, is that when there are young children involved, usually the care of custody is given to the woman. Why is that?
In law, we have something called the tender years doctrine. This is the presumption in law that once a child is between the ages of 0 to 5, they are very vulnerable and really need the care of the mother. When you weigh between the mother and the mother usually gets the rights to that child in terms of custody because of that doctrine in law. However, it is not absolute. And what I mean is that depending on a case-by-case scenario, a court may hear both sides and actually determine that the person who is fit to have actual custody of this child is the father. So it is not something that is blanket or set in stone, but that tender years doctrine is the general rule of thumb, so to say. Yes.
Okay. So then, come to a later date, it's possible that the custody could then go to the father.
Yes, sure.
Under what circumstances would that be?
Under the circumstances that the father, in the court's view, or in the view of both parties, the father is best placed to take care of the child for several reasons. One would be economic reasons. Maybe the father is in a better economic position to take care of the child. Number two is mental reasons, where it is found that the mother is unfit to take care of the child, because before a matter gets to court, it has gone through children's offices who have now prepared a report showing that this child lives this way, and the relationship with the father is this way, the relationship with the mother is this way. So the court would be very pained to give custody to the mother, where it is found that maybe the mother abuses a child or neglects the child, or has gotten married and just abandoned the child. Yes.
And what about upkeep? We are seeing several cases in country whereby upkeep is demanded by, in most cases, the mother, in the case of separation and or divorce, and then the court will award upkeep. Because is there an understanding, or is there expectation that the father, like you said earlier, Wakili,
Yes.
should provide for this family. And so usually the court will say, okay, fine. If you were living together, you would have provided anyway. So now that you're living apart, for whatever reason, please carry on and provide. We have seen cases where some of these things have, by virtue of the fact that if the father is financially capable,
Yes.
that the demands then are quite rigorous. What does the law say about upkeep matters in the case of separation and or divorce?
Now, the Children's Act, which came into force in 2022, is very progressive in that regard, and it views the rights and the responsibilities of both parents as equal. So what that means is that that expectation is no longer found in law. So that means that if a man provides 50, the woman provides 50.
Okay.
In terms of upkeep, in terms of custody, they share custody. They have the same rights to that child in terms of custody, in terms of provision. It is just that the court, because also we are guiding human beings, you're not just guiding something that is abstract. The court has to take into consideration the circumstances, such that if the child is living full-time with the mother, then it means that the mother is paying rent, the mother is buying food, the mother is doing all of these things. So it has to think about this when it directs the father to maybe pay school fees, pay medical cover, and maybe upkeep for the mother. But ultimately, it is a 50-50. Yes.
Okay. And briefly, there's this common saying, I don't know if it goes this way: the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind nonetheless.
Yes.
So in terms of the lengthy process of a divorce proceeding, is it usually a deterrent in terms of this couple that is not seeing eye to eye? Hey, we need to go for 2 years, 3 years in order to get divorced. Why not pack your bags and leave, and I'll leave? As simple as that. On paper, we won't be together, but maybe by law, we still are. And then equally, the cost factor. Is it expensive to start a divorce proceeding? Is it equally a deterrent? Talk to us briefly.
So the first issue to consider is that a divorce is something that happens without collusion. That you and your wife can't collude to get a divorce, in as much as people should be able to decide that this has ended. There has to be a reason, and the law has to sort of get someone who is at fault. That is why you get grounds for divorce.
Just stop right there.
Yes.
You're saying that people cannot go to court and say, we've actually decided that we are not going to live together.
No.
Why not?
Why?
Because that's collusion. You can't collude to get a divorce.
Boy, so what
But
are
we
you doing
colluded,
again?
we colluded to get married, for heaven's sake.
That is a problem that the drafters have to take into consideration. But as at now, when two parties want a divorce, you as Muga has to come up with a petition to show that this marriage has ended because of this, because of this, because of this. There has to be a reason. And that reason means that there is a dispute. So whether it is defended or not, it can't be both sides have come together. Which now brings me to the second issue of the time that it takes. Courts have really done the most in trying to bring down the time that divorce cases take in court by dealing with a few matters administratively, such that you don't keep on coming to court every other time. You just come for the hearing, and the divorce is given when all the elements are met. Number 3, on the costs, again, I said you can't collude. So it means you have to have your lawyer, she has to have her lawyer. You have to go to court because it's a legal process, and you have to wait until that divorce is given. So other than that, I'd say divorces, that is just what underpins divorces in Kenya.
What's the average length in terms of the period of time for divorces to get finished? From the starting of the process, filing of a petition to the final decree.
I would hate to speak for the judiciary, but what they say is that matters are not to exceed 1 year. So that would be the average turnaround time. You could get in 6 months, it's over. But also you'll find that divorces take different forms, because some divorces are nastier than others. Others are looking at the end goal at the end, which is matrimonial property. So they'll fight in court, in the divorce court, just to get grounds. This person did this person did this. So others are very straightforward. You filed a petition, I don't want to contest it, it's fine, it moves. So it really depends on the dynamics of the case and the particulars. So I'd give it between maybe 6 months, 1 year, to at most maybe 2 years in the worst case, yes.
Okay. So when we look at a lot of these cases of divorce, in the recent past, the numbers have escalated. If you look traditionally, it was rare to find that people would leave their marriage, right? For some reason, there was a way to sort out issues, whatever the case may be, and unless they were extreme. And I look at the law, whereas the law is there and it adjudicates, it does certain things, it's not static. It operates in a society that is fluid.
Yes.
And that their culture is still there, and that these are people. And I remember Justice Lenaola saying once that, certain things are taken into consideration when judgments are being made. It can't just be straight-jacket way of doing things.
Yes.
Has the law contributed to the numbers that we are seeing? You cannot compare the numbers that we've seen of separations and divorces in the last 10 years. You want to compare them to 20 years ago. It just didn't happen.
Well, I think people are now getting married in the information age, which is right now people have a lot of information regarding marriages, regarding divorce. A while back, most people didn't even know that you could get divorced. They knew it would last until you die. And this is informed by, for example, some churches, they are very strict when it comes to divorce. You'd rather be killed than leave a marriage. That is their outlook. So when these are the modes of information that people rely on, then it doesn't even come to mind. But when people are educated, they learn that this is actually a way out. You can actually leave a marriage that is not working for you. Also, other dynamics in terms of a while back, the resource distribution was mainly patriarchal, which was men had all the money, women hardly had money. Right now, it's a man can have no money and a woman can have money. So all those dynamics just are coming into play at the same time, so they're informing all of these things. Yes.
Okay.
Finally, I've just seen a comment there. Still back to the grounds for divorce and separation.
Yes.
Irreconcilable differences. Can you go to the court and say, me and my partner can't see eye to eye?
We've agreed that we can't do this thing
No
anymore.
collusion.
The wording is agreed. We can't agree.
Colluded.
Yes.
Okay.
But I can cite a retrievable breakdown of this union because of this and this reason. Yes.
Okay. Do you think, surely the legal fraternity, judicial officers must look at a situation and say, okay, guys, things are do you think, is the law ever in an advisory position to folks and say, come on, can we look at this from a different eye and maybe try not to?
The Constitution has ADR as a proposed mechanism, and this is what is encouraged in our courts, that before you get to a point where you go to court filing for divorce, try therapy, try mediation, try negotiations. Yes, courts are always a last resort, and even lawyers say that to clients that you should try this and this, because courts are usually a matter of last resort. When you get there's no going back. Yeah.
Okay. So as we look at where society is going, as we look at where communities are going and going into the future, a lot of people say when children are involved, and this is really last, when children are involved, you say, okay, well, I'm going to stay for the children, whereby you've said that there's ADR, and a lot of people say, well, no, if there are children involved and the situation is actually sticky, you'd rather leave than stay. From an advisory legal perspective, does that make sense?
Well, it does to consider ADR, especially where children are involved, because there's no winning. That is, as lawyers, most of us, we hold that opinion. When it comes to matters of child custody and maintenance, when it comes to issues of divorce where children are involved, there's no real winner, because the child did not ask to be born, and yet you've dragged the child to court processes, and in some instances, they're even required to give viva voce evidence. So
In layman's language, what did you just say?
They are required to speak in court.
Yes.
Yes, and so such traumatic experiences for a child. No, I'm just citing the extent to which you can put a child through a lot of issues that a child should not be put through, should not go through. So that is why I think ADR should be very recommended, especially in child cases, because it removes that aspect of courts, lawyers writing to each other, battling it out in court, having a hearing where we are saying this one did this, this one did this. It is not very pretty.
Indeed.
Yes.
Wakili Jeru Benjamin has been our guest this hour, looking at very many issues around separation and divorce and some of the elements that come into play, ignored a lot of times, but extremely important. Thank you for being part of our Justice Thursday conversation today and bringing us to the end of Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, for this Thursday. Thank you very much for being here with us. We continue our conversations, God willing, tomorrow at 6 a.m. Jesse, you're doing well. We'll finish the week well, I'm sure. Good morning. It's 10:01.